Hey everyone, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I am Dr. Kristen.
I am Dr. Erin.
And we are social scientists with PhDs who are vaguely obsessed with talking about culture, both popped and lived, and how those things affect how we all live our lives. We're educators who talk about empathy, inclusivity, and intersectionality through coverage of everything from Bridgerton and The Crown to the latest headlines and what social science says about them. We are absolutely enchanted when anyone wants to talk to us about these things. We talk to each other about them all the time. We hit record for y'all. So if you would like to join the conversation, comment wherever you are listening to this, and we can't wait to talk to you.
This video is part of our Colonizers World Tour series, where we are now into month 2, chapter 2. In a weird in-between between places that were never colonized and places that were colonized. And we've got a couple countries all in the Middle East that were sort of influenced by colonizers, but not colonized like legitimately. So our Colonizers World Tour series takes a look at a different country each week. This month, places that weren't quite colonized, and looks at how their history and culture and relationship with colonialism affects their culture and how they interact with the world. So up first on our list of quasi-related non-colonies in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia. We always start these videos with what we knew about this country before we started doing research. So what I knew about Saudi Arabia was absolutely nothing except what I learned about Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, through the assassination of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which happened in 2018. And he disappeared after entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. It was very dramatic. But I don't remember much about it from that time, except that it was Saudi Arabia. So that's what I knew. Dr. Kristen, what did you know about Saudi Arabia?
I admittedly knew a bit more. Largely because I've done a lot of Islamic studies and looked and loved a lot of Muslim people who have talked a lot about Saudi Arabia, not only because it is the home to the 2 most holy cities in Islam, but the particular branch practiced by the royal family and therefore the whole country is, shall we say, controversial among my friends.
Oh boy, is it ever. So we will get into Wahhabism and some other specific issues about Saudi Arabia in this 101 breakdown. But first of all, we're going to go over some demographics. The population of Saudi Arabia is roughly 35 million people. The capital city is Riyadh. And as Dr. Kristen mentioned, the two of the holiest cities in the Muslim faith, Mecca and Medina, are in Saudi Arabia. The official language of the country is Arabic with Hijazi and Najdi variants. The currency is the rial, which is the equivalent to, like, $1 is to 3.75 Saudi Arabian rial, to give you a sense of that currency exchange. The system of government is a weird kind of theocracy with this pact and partnership between the royal family, the House of Saud, and the religious faction in Saudi Arabia. It was declared a kingdom in 1932 and is currently led by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This pact goes all the way back to 1744 with the Saud family and descendants of Ibn Ad al-Wahhab. I'm terrible at pronouncing things in Arabic, so apologies for that. It is physically located geographically on the Arabian Peninsula, the largest peninsula in the world. I learn new things all the time. And it is an oil-rich Middle Eastern country, as we know, bordered by Yemen, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, Jordan, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. Woo!
Yeah, we probably should have said we both knew there was oil in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I did.
We are humans in the world. That was just so, we should have said that, but we both knew.
That was the obvious thing. And to round out the demographics, ethnically, Saudi Arabia is pretty solidly Arab. It's about 90% Arab, 10% Afro-Asian, 60% are Saudi citizens, and 40% our expats from abroad. That used to have a lot of small tribes and clans, all of Arab descent. Until the 1960s, most of the population was nomadic or semi-nomadic, and the majority of ethnic Arabs are tribal Bedouins. Asian expatriates are mostly from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And as we mentioned at the start, it has kind of a weird relationship with colonialism. It is a former protectorate of the British Empire, I think it was at the time.
Yeah, it was the Empire at the time.
The United Kingdom. And during the First World War, Saudi Arabia signed the 1915 Treaty of Darren with the British government, which accepted status as a British protectorate. They are strategic and longtime allies with the United Kingdom. The Treaty of Darren was superseded by the Treaty of Jeddah in 1927, which recognized the independence of the House of Saud and the sovereignty over what was then the Kingdom of Hejaz and Nejd, but the two regions were unified into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So it's more of a strategic and political and geographic connection than a cultural one. From the research that we found, there wasn't a lot of influence from British culture and society on the Arabian Peninsula and in what became Saudi Arabia. But it has this protectorate and strategic political alliance with the United Kingdom. Dr. Kristen, would you care to explain to our dear viewers what's going on with Wahhabism?
Wahhabism is complicated for a host of reasons, including a lot of emotions around Wahhabism. At its very, very core, it is a conservative movement within Islam. Very, very core. It came about significantly after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in a movement to return to pure Islam. That is across the board. The definition of a conservative or fundamentalist movement is anytime somebody wants to go back to something that was. Since the kind of birth of Wahhabism, the practice of it has strayed quite far from the writings, according to several scholars. However, that is an emotionally controversial topic for adherents of Wahhabism, as is evidenced by many YouTube comments. And there are a lot of emotions around the fact as well that the writings that surround Wahhabism and that found Wahhabism offer the theological justification for most of the militant, radical terrorist groups that claim Islam as their faith. It's the Wahhabi theology that they find basis and or justification for their feelings in. According to scholars, not me, according to smart people who can read Arabic and have read the Quran in something other than English, because I've only read it in English, and have read the texts in something other in proper Arabic. Again, I cannot read Arabic. So we're going to link to a video that interviews several scholars at, for instance, the Islamic Seminary here in the United States, the head of several Islamic studies departments, and kind of see what that is. However, Wahhabism is, no matter what else it is a conservative Islamic movement. It is also probably the one that most people who feel that Islam is terrible or terrible to women in particular, it's usually what they're actually talking about. Because it does theologically advocate for the complete separation of men and women in all areas of society. It does advocate for the veils and the full covering of women and a lot of other things like that. A lot of the stereotypes that you may carry if you are an American who watched the Taliban on the news for a long time, a lot of those stereotypes come from some of the Wahhabism writings. They are interpretations of them in many ways. So again, this is complicated. I don't know how many more times I can say that. Please don't at me. I am not an expert, but there are things I know.
We're doing our best here, folks.
We're doing our best here. So speaking of Wahhabism, that goes directly into women in Saudi Arabia. So you may remember in the year of our Lord and several other people's lords, 2017, that there was a lot of hubbub around women being able to drive. There's a great memoir about the woman that fought for the civil rights of the ability for women to drive. We will link that, and her name is escaping me because I'm a terrible person. But we'll link that memoir in the show notes because I remember reading it and quite enjoying it. But since then, women can drive.
Manal al-Sharif.
Thank you so much.
I had it written down somewhere, I knew.
Women are able to drive. You are allowed to go out and about in Riyadh, especially without a head covering. Since tourists have been granted visas since in 2018, tourists in particular do not have to wear head coverings. You still have to wear respectful dress. No spaghetti strap tank tops in mosques, but that's a universal rule. Please never wear a tank top to a mosque. Please don't ever do that.
And I mean, like St. Paul's Cathedral.
Yeah, you can't do it in the Vatican either, although I think I accidentally did because mine fell off. It's hot in Rome.
It is hot. I was not happy to put on a cardigan.
Yeah, it was hot in Rome. But this is why I now travel with scarves like everywhere I go.
Yes.
Anyway, on paper, things are getting better for women. And there are many Saudis who would tell you that things are getting better for women. There are just as many Saudi women who are seeking asylum in other countries, or who will tell you it is still terrible, who will tell you it is terrible, especially in rural areas. You should always know that progressive movements start in cities and sometimes don't even reach rural areas. And so that doesn't surprise me, especially in a country that is largely formerly nomadic, and like the terrain, no one lives in like half the bottom of this country because it's sand. So
yeah, it's like something of the population is like 70 to 80% urban at this point. Like,
yeah, because people like water. It's one of those. It's one of our pesky traits.
One of those things we need.
So there is movement. I feel very strongly that Western women and non-Muslim women should have absolutely no opinion on headscarves whatsoever. We should have no opinion on dress at all. That's not our place. There are several. We're going to link to some books. I've actually covered a book by a very prominent Muslim scholar who I love, named Mona Hadwani, which I'm saying incorrectly. And she talks about the headscarf and her relationship with it as a Muslim woman. And all of that being the case, my gender equity radar does go off when we talk about Saudi Arabia, and probably will for a very long time.
Yeah.
My sexuality equity radar also goes off with Saudi Arabia. Essentially, anything that isn't male-female relationships is illegal and up to punishable by death. People will assure you that doesn't happen that often. I would not feel comforted by that were I a homosexual person. I don't think I'd feel great about that. We will link to in the ongoing document that we will be nurturing about Saudi Arabia. There's a company evidently that rates how good it is for business and how good it is for like LGBTQ companies. And Saudi Arabia gets the lowest score possible. So doesn't seem great. And that makes me scared and sad. Mm-hmm. Those are not things I learned, however, about Saudi Arabia. I kind of knew those. What I did learn about Saudi Arabia is that they have televised poetry competitions, which is amazing. I also had no idea, and I love this geography fact, it is the largest country in the world without like constantly apparent rivers, because they have these wadis that show up at certain times of the year in the desert, but the rest of the time they do not have permanent rivers.
I know. It's so interesting.
I'm fascinated.
It is fascinating. All the things that we found fascinating about Saudi Arabia, we learned so much going into this process, especially we found some really great videos about geography and kind of the lay of the land. And I'm enjoying so much as we go through these months, learning all about these places that I hadn't really invested that much time in before. What I found most fascinating about Saudi Arabia was two things. As a person who is not a religious scholar, Dr. Kristen is, there were things I did not know about how Mecca operates. I did know that it was
fair. Yeah.
a pilgrimage site. I knew what the Hajj was, which is the once in a lifetime requirement that every practicing Muslim has to go on a pilgrimage.
If they are financially or physically able, there are There are allowances for lack of financial or physical ability. Let me also say too, I did not know this, jumping in on Mecca, that non-Muslims are legally not allowed within the city. That was news to me. I did not know that.
Yeah, so and just the way that they have navigated these rules about this particular holy city. There is no airport in Mecca because they didn't want airplanes disrupting the prayers and services and activities that were going on. You must be a Muslim to enter the city. And what I also found really interesting was that they had no restrictions on your sect of Islam or your nationhood, which, you know, could be surprising given the political nature of the Middle East, a lot of Muslim countries, and Saudi Arabia's relationship with a lot of other Muslim countries,
especially Iran.
But they won't turn you away, like, no matter what. But the way they've politicized the pilgrimage is that they give quotas to countries for the number of people that are allowed to come for the pilgrimage each year. And the better the relationship you have with Saudi Arabia, the more, the bigger quota you get. So for example, they're like, one of their best relationships internationally is with Indonesia. And so Indonesia has a really high quota for the pilgrimage.
I'd imagine the United States is a pretty healthy one too.
Yes, so they've worked it into that. The other thing that I found really interesting is we could see in the next coming years a burgeoning film industry in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Again, to the extent that that is restricted by the government remains to be seen. But the first cinema opened in Riyadh in 2018 after a 40-year hiatus. And the inaugural Red Sea International Film Festival in Jeddah was launched in 2019, supposed to happen in 2020, didn't because pandemic, and so is happening this year in 2021. And it is the first Saudi independent nonprofit organization with an official mandate to promote film culture. So that's a pretty big deal. Again, the level of influence that the Saudi government will have, or that the religious clerics will have on this film festival, we don't know. Their management team has a 50-50 gender split, though, and I was excited to find that out when I was doing research. But in our Living Google Doc, you will find a link to the Red Sea International Film Festival. And hopefully with the COVID of it all, they'll make things more accessible internationally to some of this content. I would be excited to see kind of what they're producing out of this film festival. But I think the last thing I would kind of want to close on, and we talked about this with Iran as well, is that, you know, there's a difference between the government and the people.
Yeah.
And the people are always a spectrum. And I think we are unlearning and relearning our own biases that we had against ethnic sects and groups. I've learned so much in the last 2 weeks about the distinction between Arabs and Persians that I previously had not invested that much time and energy in. But I think, you know, yes, there are a lot of problems with, from a Western perspective, with the human rights issues in Saudi Arabia. But there's a whole spectrum of perspectives and experiences, from people that are extremely devout to the Wahhabi tradition and believe that everything that they're doing is right, to people who are very much against it, and all sorts in between, finding a way to live and work in, you know, contemporary Saudi Arabia. So I hope as we scratch the surface of these places, it just prompts other people to dig in, as we are excited to do, and to learn more about the complexity of life in Saudi Arabia.
And one of the ways we're going to do that is the next video in this playlist, which will be when we are talking about the 2014 film that I will butcher the name of, Wadjda, Wadjda. It was the Saudi Arabia's very first entry into the foreign film category at the Academy Awards. Mm-hmm. It earned a nomination at BAFTA. It premiered at Venice. It is a very well-known film, and it is currently streaming on Netflix here in the United States. So we will be talking about it. It is the story of a 10-year-old Saudi girl who dreams of owning a bicycle. And I am excited to watch this movie, and we're excited to talk about it with you guys in the next video. So we will see you then.
Take care, everybody.